Hello guys, welcome back. Now today we're going to be discussing the biggest losers from NHL free agency 2019. Now NHL free agency is known for its dumb and sometimes stupid contracts, and there was a lot to go around this time in free agency. So what were the worst contracts this year, and who lost free agency 2019? Watch till the end to find out. Every single year in free agency, we see teams scramble to get the guys that they want, and in the process end up signing terrible contracts. And this year was no exception. We saw a lot of different contracts that were iffy at best, and a lot of contracts that are very laughable. Speaking of laughable, the first loser of free agency, in my opinion, is the Pittsburgh Penguins. And they had themselves quite an intriguing last few days, and that's not really a good thing. First off, we had the Phil Kessel trade, and in free agency, we saw them sign Brandon Tanev. And Pittsburgh is just kind of confusing right now. Jim Rutherford, who was just inducted into the Hall of Fame, right now isn't making himself look like a Hall of Fame GM whatsoever. Now, of course, the elephant in the room, they ended up signing Brandon Tanev to an atrocious deal that I still have no idea the even reason why they did it. They end up signing him to a 6-year deal at $3.5 million. They also signed Joseph Blandisi, an AHL guy, 1 year at $700,000. But the big contract, again, is that whole Tanev deal. And I watched quite a bit of Tanev in Winnipeg. I think he's a decent third-line guy, and if you use him as a third-line guy, he is decent. He is meh defensively. He's meh offensively at best. And signing him to 6 years, I still don't know the reasoning there. Again, they should have learned from last season when you signed Jack Johnson to that atrocious deal. I don't know why they're signing free agents like that in the first place. A mediocre guy that, yes, could be decent with a guy like Sidney Crosby, but he's not the type of player to lead that group. And at 6 years at $3.5 million is nowhere near worth it. And I thought after they traded Phil Kessel that we would see a big trade coming from them again, or a big move, or a big free agent signing. But they made their big free agent signing already on a guy that is a third-line guy, at best, on Pittsburgh. And it just makes no sense for me whatsoever what Pittsburgh is trying to accomplish here. Again, I can see where you like him when it comes to the grit, when it comes to some of the speed that he provides, but at $3.5 million, even if it was a 1-year deal, it would still be pretty bad. But at 6 years for a guy who's played pretty much 150 NHL games, it just makes no sense for me whatsoever. And albeit they didn't really sign that many guys, but that contract right there made them a loser almost immediately. And now with signing that contract, that makes their free agent situation even more complicated. They got a lot of guys that they do need to re-sign. Guys like Aston Reese, Bludger, you got Marcus Pettersson, you got Chris Wyman, and Pittsburgh right now has $1.59 million in cap space. You can't tell me that all those guys are going to somehow find a way to sign in that area, because it is not going to happen. Pittsburgh either needs to make a move or let those guys go, and those are solid quality players. Guys that, I mean, Bludger could probably be better than Chris Tanev right now, and that's just how crazy this contract is, because again, I thought they were going to do something big, maybe get rid of some other cap, and now they kind of have to make a trade because of how bad that Tanev signing is. And moving on to the next loser of NHL free agency, I have the Vancouver Canucks, and this just seems like a routine every single year. It seems the Vancouver Canucks are putting themselves deeper in the free agent hole, and this year really was no exception. Having Tyler Myers and Jordy Ben at really average at best contracts is not going to do them any favors whatsoever. Jim Benning's strong suit has never been free agency, but the guy just cannot sign a good contract to save his life, man. Yes, we know that he's fantastic at drafting, developing, and all that, and that's definitely important, but you gotta get the offseason right. You gotta get trades right, you gotta get free agency right, and Jim Benning has failed to do that in his time with Vancouver. And this past year was the status quo for him. It was, again, another year where they don't fix their problems, and they end up throwing at the wrong money at the wrong guys like Tyler Myers, guys like Jordy Ben, guys that don't fix their problem both offensively and defensively, and they're just big names, guys that will be physical. And that's not what Vancouver needs to make the playoffs. What they need to make the playoffs is more skilled players, better players that, you know, can actually play defense. Now, the Canucks ended up signing Tyler Myers to a 5-year deal at $6 million, and he was reported to get upwards of $8 million, which just makes it even more insane. And again, it's a little bit more of a pay cut, which makes it look like Tyler Myers is a little bit better of a contract, but it's still not that good of a contract. He's worth max like $3.5 million, but giving him $6 million I still think is a mistake. Even though it wasn't as bad as first reported, it doesn't mean it's a good contract whatsoever. And the same thing goes with Jordie Benn. He has fantastic veteran leadership. I think he can be decent physical-wise, but defensively he's not that great anymore. Offensively, he is not anything worthwhile. And Vancouver, again, needs that type of defenseman. They can't keep banking on Alex Edler to be that type of guy, and Quinn Hughes still probably will take a couple of years to be that #1 guy in Vancouver. They need guys that will fill that gap. Guys like Jake Garner, who can just command a power play. They could have thrown money at him, and it definitely would have been worth it, but now you sign Tyler Myers and Jordie Benn, combined 2 more contracts for sure than you would have given Jake Gardner, which I think is a huge mistake, 100%. Now, for my next loser of free agency 2019, I have the Montreal Canadiens. Now, let's just look at the Vancouver Canucks, who did too much. Signing Tyler Myers, Jordie Benn, that was too much for them. But on the other hand, you had the Montreal Canadiens, who did, in my opinion, too little. Now, they obviously made a huge splash, offering Sebastian Aho, having the first offer sheet since 2013, and I will commend them for that. Give them a round of applause, because that was fantastic to cover on this channel especially, and it was a ton of fun drama to go over. But even without that, they didn't have anything to show for that either, and throughout free agency, yeah, sure, they did end up getting Ben Sherratt, but that's not really a great takeaway from a team that has so much cap space to work with. Of course, Montreal's 2 big signings were Ben Sherratt and Keith Kincaid. They had Ben Sherratt for a 3-year deal at $3.50 million, and this whole contract is it's just terrible in my opinion. He's bad offensively, he's so bad, and defensively he was okay, but for $3.5 million, he's not worth that contract, and for 3 years, he has a modified no-trade clause, which means that he has 10 teams that he needs to go to, or wants to go to, and Montreal can't turn to any other team. So they're basically locked in to Ben Sherratt for those 3 years. A guy that, in my opinion, you do not want to be locked in. A physical guy that likely won't age all too well either. And for Montreal, again, they also got Keith Kincaid, a 1-year deal, $1.75 million. I'm not sure if he will be the backup for Carey Price. I would assume, since he is getting paid $1.75 million. I personally would have Ryan Lindgren as the backup, finally give him a chance. But looks like Montreal still trying to develop in the AHL, which I think could work. But I think they should go for the younger guy. I don't know if Keith Kincaid, though, is eligible for the AHL, but I hope he does, because Montreal signing another backup goalie just doesn't make sense to me. I've said this time and time again, when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens, they shouldn't be paying Ben Sherratt any money. They should be going after freaking, my gosh, Jake Gardner, man. And it makes no sense why they didn't go after him, because he's a perfect fit for them. A left-handed defenseman who has so much offensive capability. And yes, I know he will be expensive, probably at $6.5 or $7 million, but he's worth that type of contract. Ben Sherratt is not, on the other hand. And Montreal has so much cap space to spend, so much opportunity. You might as well go for the much better player, the clearly better player, both offensively and I would say defensively most nights. And I feel like when it comes to Jake Garner, he's the guy that Montreal should have gone after, and for some reason they go after Ben Sherratt, which, in my opinion, also makes them a loser. Now, before we get into the biggest loser of NHL free agency, I want to give an honorable mention to a team that lost the offseason, but it wasn't really in their control. And I'm going to talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets, who had themselves a couple of rough weeks. Now, when it comes to free agency, they ended up signing Gustav Nyquist. They had a couple of decent other signings, but overall, they just took a massive L on pretty much every single level. Columbus's 2 big signings were, of course, the Gustav Nyquist signing and the Ryan Murray extension. First off, the Gustav Nyquist signing, he ended up signing for 4 years on the dot at $5.5 million. On the other hand, you had the Ryan Murray contract. He ended up extending with the Columbus Blue Jackets 2 years at $4.6 million. And I like both of these contracts for Columbus. Again, they had so much cap space, so it was pretty much a given that they go for a couple of free agents, and Gustav Nyquist is that type of guy. I don't know if Gustav Nyquist is for sure worth $5.5 million, but again, Columbus has that money to spend, so I think it's fine. And same thing with Ryan Murray. He had a rebound here for Columbus a little bit, was a little bit better. His career still hasn't panned out completely in the right direction, but he is still young. He still can turn around. And 2 years at that amount of money, I think is decent for them. And again, at 4.6, it's almost no risk, and he still is young. So I think that contract is good. And same thing with the Gustav Nyquist money, because they pretty much had to pay somebody, or else they weren't even going to hit the cap floor. It was that bad. Now, moving on to the biggest loser of the 2019 NHL free agency, I have the New York Islanders. Now, just put yourselves in the New York Islanders' shoes, because it was not a good couple of weeks for them. Now, just imagine you're in both Panarin and the Bobrovsky sweepstakes, and both players pretty much end up dipping at the last moment. You end up giving Panarin the most money, $1 million more than the New York Rangers, and he goes to your rival team in the same city with all your fans who who hate him right now. And then you have your star goaltender, your Vezina goaltender. You don't add him enough, or you don't give him a contract that he likes. He ends up going to the Chicago Blackhawks for 1 year for some reason. And then you have your captain, Anders Lee, who almost left the team until the very last minute. And just imagine, after all of that, you sign a injury-prone goaltender to 4 years at $5 million. Looking at you, Semyon Varlamov, that is not a good contract whatsoever. And after all that failure, they have Semyon Varlamov to show for it. And that Anders Lee contract isn't even good either. They just barely kept their captain, and it wasn't a good contract. 7 years for $7 million. And Anders Lee has had he had that 140-goal season, but that was with John Tavares and him just feeding him every single game. He no longer has that, and he's been meh last season. He was decent. I think he's worth $6 million, but 7 years at $7 million, I think will be a mistake for them. And they almost had him let him go. He almost was a Montreal Canadien, if you don't remember that. And that's just the whole situation there. Obviously, when it comes to New York Islanders, it didn't go their way. But that Lee contract and that Semyon Varlamov contract just put the cherry on top for the New York Islanders being the biggest loser so far this free agency. And I will say, it's not a huge gap between Pittsburgh, Montreal, Vancouver, and the New York Islanders. It's not a huge gap when it comes to the loser category, but I still think they are the biggest loser. And when it comes to the signings that they made, they weren't even good. And how many guys are in contention for that didn't end up signing there, it was just so funny to see. And the Islanders giving Panarin $12.5 million offer, having that on the table. We knew Panarin loves money, and that's why he left Columbus, obviously, but he ends up signing with the New York Rangers, again, a rival team, basically the next door ahead, and that's what makes Islanders fans so salty, and rightfully so, because Panarin almost is a New York Islander, Bobrovsky was almost a New York Islander, and Anders Lee almost was a Montreal Canadien. And for the Islanders, again, they almost had Panarin. They almost had a couple of other guys. I think they had that blueprint set. If they had some other forwards that came on the team with that cap space that they did end up having, I think it could have been a very successful offseason. Keeping Robin Leonard, they offered him a 2-year contract. It could have been that way. They could have kept Robin Leonard almost easily. It was reported that Lou Lamoriello hung up the phone on Robin Leonard because he didn't sign when he wanted him to sign. And that is just egregious. For a guy who almost won the Vezina trophy to go to your team in a snap of the finger, that's why I think the New York Islanders could be out of the playoffs, and that's why I think they're losers of this free agency. But of course, with this video, I need to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So let me know, what do you think about my losers for the 2019 NHL free agency? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Let me know. And of course, the question to you, who do you think lose the free agency so far? But if you guys want some more Grav videos just like this one, you can click on this card right here to watch my video on Artemi Panarin and him signing with the New York Rangers. But that'll be it for today, guys. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on my losers of free agency and who you think lost free agency yourselves. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.